In this lecture, I'm going to be demonstrating how to create different viewports in Paperspace and also how to link those viewports to scale labels that will update automatically. So for this example, I'm going to start with a rotor from a rotary engine. If you know what that is, that's fine. If you don't, it's a piece of an engine that I kind of like, and it's a pretty good example of an object that you might want to use multiple scales on. So I'm going to start with the circle tool. I'm going to specify its center at 0, 0, and I'm going to give it a radius of 2. Now the inside of this is going to be a bunch of teeth, so I need to then apply those. So let's do a line tool, and I'm going to have it snap here, and I want that line to be 125 thousandths, and I'm going to have it be at an angle of 270. Okay, so there's our small line. This is going to end up actually being a construction line. Before I do that though, I'm going to offset, and I'm going to offset those about the same distance to either side. So there's my offset lines, and now I need to create some other lines for the tooth profile. So as I'm creating this, it'd probably be good for you to practice on your own as well. Okay, so now we're starting to get the profile of the tooth, and I'm going to turn some of this into construction geometry. I'm going to offset the circle towards the inside as well. Okay, so there's my array items. I need actually 50 of these, if I remember correctly. Let's make sure they patterned right. That looks good to me. I'm going to not leave this associative because I'm actually going to end up trimming this. So there's the array. Start the trim tool. Here's our initial tooth. So I'm going to select all, and I'm going to start to, I'm noticing something here. Yep. And that should have extended that. Okay, so let's try that again. Non-associative, close my array. I'm going to trim everything. So let's trim that, let's trim that, and that. So we're starting to see the profile. It's a little bit more than I need, but at least it gives you an idea. And now I need to fillet it because I want to have little rounds on those. Now if you're wondering where I came up with these numbers, I of course have practiced this so I could have a reasonable lecture here, and in this case I already had these numbers, so that makes it easier. So there's some fillets on this so it looks nice. So there's our tooth profile. We'll do one more here even though this is too many. At least you can see, get the idea. And then now we need to figure out what to pattern. Okay, so I'm going to delete this, so we're going to be patterning this part all the way to here. That's our pattern. And we can delete all these pieces now. Now I'm actually going to leave the outer circle in place. So I'm going to select all of these pieces here. And then I want to deselect the outer circle because I want that there so I can find my center. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click on it. Now it's no longer selected. Can delete that. Okay, there we go. I'm going to put that outer circle on the construction layer now. So it's still there. And now I'm going to start an array again. So now I've got the exact objects that I want to use for my array. Okay, once again, I want to pick the center point. I'm going to use the snap override here so I can make sure to just get the center. And I am going to have this one be associative, and I'm going to turn it up to 50. Here we go. So there's the inside tooth profile of the object that I want. Now I'm going to create a polygon. I want 3 sides. The center is going to be in 0, 0. I'm going to inscribe it in a circle. And I want these sides to be about 10 inches. So we'll give them, I think, a radius of 6 is going to do it. Might be a bit on the big side, but we can just check it. Yep, that looks fine. That guy is going to be on my construction layer too. Okay, so this is the basic shape for the object. Now I'm going to create some arcs. There's an arc here, and I want it to have a radius of 15. So there we go. So that was a endpoint, start point, end point radius arc. And now to give it the outside shape, I can start to do some other things. So I'm going to do an offset. Well, actually, let's go ahead and do an array. Okay, we're going to do 6 of those. Sorry, 3 of those. That was 6 to begin with. I don't want it associative because I am going to end up trimming these outer pieces after I'm done with the array. I'm going to have an offset distance of 1. Bring it in here. There we go. And I'm going to have another offset distance of 0.04. Okay, after a bunch of trimming work, we're now left with this at the top. I'm going to move this to the construction layer. And you'll notice I'm not deleting my construction lines, so I have them later if I need to use them. So there's the tip detail. There's the tooth detail. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete these arcs because now I can just pattern this arc up here. But before I do that, I'm also going to do something on the side over here, because each of the faces of this rotor has a little indented combustion chamber in it. So that is a 1/2 inch deep, so there's the 1/2 inch offset. Okay, and then that line is going to establish the center, so we're going to offset that too, and this is, I think, about 2 inches wide on either side. So nope, sorry, it's 2 inches total. So there we go, there's our little combustion chamber area. Start the trim operation again. And in this case, I don't want to do trim all. I want to pick these lines and this line as our trim basis. So then I'm also going to pick these outside corners here. Okay, the fillet here is about 1/4 of an inch. So let's reset that radius. And I'm going to type M so I can do more than one at once. Okay, and then I'm going to turn this into a construction line because that was just a helper line. And then all these are actually hidden lines. Okay, now at this point I can do another array, and I'm going to pick all of the objects I just created with the trimming and everything. So those 2 lines. Also, we want to array these. We're going to pick the center point here. And once again, it's going to try to do 6, but I only want 3. So there we go. I can leave that associative, and I'm going to close it. So now I realize that I did a little bit of a mistake here because I forgot to trim each corner after I was done, but I can go ahead and fix that now. So there we go. I'm going to do a zoom extent. So now we have our full completed assembly. And if we come into our viewport, or not assembly, but our part, if we come into our viewport, you'll notice that, I mean, you can see everything pretty well. Let's turn off our construction lines here. But some of these details are really, really small. So there's 2 things I want to show you here. One is how to create a scale label and link it to this viewport, and then the second one is how to make additional viewports. So I'm in paper space now, and I'm going to create a text field, and I'm just going to put it up here at the top, and I'm going to type scale, and I'm going to have a colon. Now I can insert a field, and I can insert that field with Control F, or I can push the field button up here. And this field, I'm going to pick object. So remember, these are all properties from the drawing, like the authors, whoever created the drawing. We can have a creation date. All of this is information from the drawing, but this one right here, this object, this field will pull information off of an object in the drawing. In this case, I actually want to use the viewport, because the viewport itself has properties. Like any other line, the viewport's actually just a box. I've got it on this cyan viewport layer, and it's literally just a line entity. So it has properties such as length, area, and so on and so forth. But there are additional properties since it is specifically a viewport that we want. So I'm going to click this button right here, which allows me to pick the object that I want to use. Now you do have to be careful here because I can really pick on any object, but I'm going to come here and I'm going to click on the line of the viewport. Notice if I click inside the viewport, nothing happens, but I want to click the line of the viewport, and you'll see right here it says that you have selected a viewport. Now the options here, we can just have it, for example, tell us what layer it is. So it's on the viewport layer, viewports. The one we want to grab here, or we can also ask what line type it is or what scale the line type is. But the one we want is this one here that says custom scale. So I'm going to say custom scale and then use scale name are going to be the two options I use. And then I'm going to hit OK. Now it immediately populates that because that viewport does indeed have a scale. It's already got a scale, so it's populated in here. And that is exactly what we want. So if we double click on the viewport, you can see down here that the scale of the viewport matches the information here. Now I do want to show you something, because if you change this, okay, now it's a 1-to-1 scale, but you'll notice that this doesn't appear to have updated. That's once again because AutoCAD does not immediately update fields in the monitor, on the monitor. However, as soon as this value is changed down here, this value actually gets updated in memory in this field. So if you're curious to know how to make sure that that matches, there's a couple things you can do. One is you can just save the drawing, which forces a refresh. Another one is you can type regen all, which updates all viewports and fields to whatever their current memory values are. So in that case, I just typed regen all to update this. Like I said, you could also save the file. So maybe I should save the file so it has other properties here. I'm going to save this on my computer because I'm going to save it in my desktop. So I've just saved it, so now these other properties, the name of the file and the save date and my username, have also updated. Now remember, some of these drawing properties, based on how the title block is set up, those are saved in DWG props. But you have to spell it right. Okay, so I can type the title. And the subject is Design 101. Okay, and now once again, those fields haven't updated here on screen, but they actually are already updated in memory. So we can do a regen all, or you could save it. Remember that any field that any text that shows up with a light gray background like these, and this is actually a field, and it should not be edited manually, should not be edited directly. Now please also be careful about where you place this. Remember, I put this on my paper space. Okay, so that text, it's here in the drawing, but if I look at the model, you won't see that text here. It's important that you put it in paper space because this viewport only lives in paper space. If I try to put that text, that same field, so let's say I try to do the same thing, Control F for the field object, pick the object, I can't actually click on the viewport here, okay, because in this case I'm in model space. Okay, note that down here, and that viewport does not exist in model space. That viewport, that cyan layer, only exists in paper space. So you'll see here it's not in model space. The only thing in model space is the actual model, and that's the way we want it. So the viewport is existing in paper space, which means that if you want to link to it, you need to be in paper space to do that. Okay, so let's turn this scale down to half. Okay, so we've got a little bit of wiggle room here, and I'm going to move the sides of the viewport over. I'm going to turn on my ortho lock so it only moves horizontally, and I'll just move it like that. So now I've got extra space. And I guess I'll turn the grid on so you can see the background a little bit better, so now we can actually tell where the viewport is. Now let's suppose that we actually want in this drawing, we want to show the detail of these other features. And you'll see they're very small here. We can't see the detail well. This would also apply if we were working on an architectural drawing and we had an elevation view of the whole front of the building, and then you can't see the detail on the doors, so you would need another viewport with another scale to be able to see that. You'd have to basically zoom in. So I'm going to come over here to my viewports layer, and on my viewports layer I'm going to make a circle. So we'll just put it over here. We'll give it a diameter of 1.5. And maybe down here we'll do another circle, and we'll give it a diameter of, let's see, also 1.5. Now if we really want it to be fancy, it would probably be good to create a construction line here and say, let's make this 3.5 long, and now let's move the center of this to the end of that line. Okay, I can see that both these circles are a bit too big, so I'm going to scale both of them around this point, and we'll say let's scale them by, let's turn off this ortho because I don't need that anymore. Let's say we'll scale them by 0.8, so just make them a little bit smaller. So now they're directly above each other, and we've got enough space for our scale labels and all. I am going to move this line up a little bit. Okay, and let's move this guy up a little bit. And all I'm trying to do here is give myself a little bit more space to work with. Alright, so the construction layer is now off. Remember, the construction layer won't print, but that's how we have. Now, these are just circles right now. If I were to make a print of this, it's called plotting. If I were to plot this drawing out, let's click on preview here, you'll see that there's no viewports shown. Okay, so there's actually nothing that's going to print right now. So how do I make these into viewports? Well, that's pretty easy. We come over here to the layout tab, and on the layout tab we click this drop down here under layout viewports. Instead of picking rectangular or polygonal, we're just going to pick this third option, which is object. And all I do is pick an object. And do the same thing again, pick an object. So now I have two more viewports, two more windows, if you will, into model space. These are both viewing the same thing as this one is. So in this one, I'm going to double click in here, and I'm going to zoom so I can see the top detail here. And you can see here as I move around, some of the stuff is highlighting in the bottom one if I wait long enough. Okay, now I'm going to double click in this viewport, and in this one I'm going to zoom into the detail on the tooth. So now all three of these are viewing the same thing. So if I make any changes to this model, they're going to be updated here in all of these viewports. Now we want to do the same thing. We're in the viewports, or in the paper space. I put that on the wrong layer too, huh? We're in paper space, and now I'm going to create some more text labels for each of these. So let's come over here to our text, create a multi-line text, and we'll do the same thing. Scale, Control F for our fields, click on object, click this crosshairs here, and I'm going to pick this viewport object. From the list then, I'm going to use scale name. Make sure it says viewport up here. And the reason I say make sure it says viewport is because if I do the same thing again, just for sake of example, and click on object, I can click on the title block. Okay, now it's pulling out the block reference, and maybe you might be like, oh, well, there's no scale here. I must have done something wrong, or it's not working. No, this is telling me that I picked the wrong thing. Likewise, I mean, you could pick text, which doesn't make sense for this, but basically this object option allows you to pick any feature and use the properties of that feature, any entity in the drawing. Now typically what you would do if there's only one viewport, you would put the scale down here. Okay, you would do the scale and create a new text field down here, and then in that text field you would just say Control F. Once again, pick an object, pick the large viewport, and use its scale. So there we go. That text is a little bit too big, so we can always come in here and modify it so it fits in this window. Okay, I think we should use a 0.1 text size here. Yeah, let's save those text changes, and then we can move it around. Now you'll notice something probably about the way I'm doing this is that I'm not using the snaps very much here when I'm just moving text around, and that is what I tend to do. I would put that on the title block text layer. So I don't actually use snaps a lot when I'm just moving text around for things like this, because then typically what you can get is if you're trying to just, let's say we're just trying to move this scale label over a little bit. Let's say we wanted to bring it down some. Okay, I'm going to turn my snaps back on, and then I'm going to try to move it. And what you can see sometimes, I'm not seeing it right now, but what you can sometimes see is that it'll snap to all kinds of things on the drawing. So it'll snap to like corners and edges. It can even snap back to itself sometimes. So yeah, see it right there, it's doing it. It's snapping to itself, so it's not going to move exactly the way I want it to. I only want to move it a little bit. So that's what I'm talking about when I say I don't necessarily use the snaps when I'm moving the text labels around. So there we've got it. We've got 3 different viewports with 3 different scales. They're all on the same page, and they're all viewing the same information. They will also all update when the drawing is updated. So, you know, if we zoom in on this one a little bit, okay, maybe I wanted actually that instead, and then I hit Control S. Now it's going to update. You can either save the file or do a regen all to get those to update.